Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com also, but nobody wishes to respond to the theoretical arguments, the contextual arguments around experiments and what their meaning would be or what the implications would be, finding the contradictions, so to speak, in the analysis, and pointing out how certain things can't be, if not any part of the truth, they can't be just part of the truth because they do create a contradiction or some sort of paradox that can't be resolved. But anyway, no one wishes to debate those. And, no matter how small a soundbite you put it into, they run away from that obligation. Alright, should be back. It's really distraction day. Alright, so anyway, Ian Gosling is apparently not going to do the experiment I said really needs to be done, because you really do have to compensate for what I explained 3 times, which is the lever isn't an ideal lever, and the catapult in this case. And so you have to logically account for that, and accounting for it, you figure out that the lever can absorb different amounts of energy depending on where you place the object. The lever uses more or less of the energy. And the fact is, the further out you put the object, the less the lever absorbs, because it moves less, just as a fact. So the simple solution to compensate for the lack of the idealization is to change the 2 to 1 relationship in distance and just make it 2 to 1 to 2.5 or 2.3 or some other point number, and that will fix it. Okay, so, but he's not going to do that experiment, apparently. So who cares? A minute and 49 seconds of him talking about parallax is a waste of my time, I'm quite sure, because I'm quite sure he's not an authority. Considering that he hasn't gotten a camera angle quite right yet. I mean, he videoed things swinging off the screen. I mean, come on. I'm not going to get camera angle advice from that guy. Alright, so in other news, the Dispar's lab guy keeps talking about proving it once again. And so I'll go over it. I mean, it's in one of the 5-minute videos. They could account for this, but they just don't wish to. They just wish to keep saying it happens. So we did a test. I guess I could draw it, but, I guess just look at one number, which is kind of funny. So he's accounting, saying friction caused him to get this 34, it's off by 34%, and this is off by 10%. And so friction caused these numbers to be way off. And yet his momentum number is perfect. So almost, 3%. So he's saying that, if you subtract the momentum, so look, you get this conservation of momentum. Even though you have 20% friction losses, you conserved all the momentum. So again, it's just more of this, that doesn't make any sense. If you're losing kinetic energy because of friction, then you have to be losing momentum. Doesn't make any logical sense to say, oh yeah, I perfectly conserved the momentum even though there was a bunch of friction. Too silly. What he also doesn't do is test anything so he could actually see something. So he actually, bought another timing gate, which is, he's never used his new scale, so I guess it really was a dampened scale. It wasn't useful for the purpose. So we never saw that, in any experiment. And so now he's got another timing gate, but what he doesn't do is the simple experiment, right? You have the 2 timing gates, just shoot a car right through both of them and see if they get really close to the same numbers for the speed of the car, right? Then at least both timing gates are reading velocities the same way. They're both correct. Or at least they're both doing the same thing the same way. They're making the same mistakes. If they're making mistakes, they're the same mistakes. But he doesn't even do that test. So, I mean, garbage in, garbage out. So again, I'll do what's in one of the 5-minute videos. I'll just do it again and just point out how this is their logic. And you're supposed to concede to it because they've proven it happens. This is the way reality works. So I have a 1 mass, and let's just say a 2 mass for the sake of the argument, and I have 100 momentums. That if I have a mass and a velocity that equals 100, it hits the 2 mass. Their argument is every time this happens, whether it's little matchbox cars, whether it's a Newton's cradle, whether it's real cars in the real world, that somehow what I'll end up with after this collision is I'll end up with 133 momentums going this way in the large object and 33 momentums going this way in the light object. And they say that makes sense because somehow this direction, motion in this direction, subtracts from motion in that direction. Now clearly in the catapult experiment, direction is irrelevant because everything's moving in the same direction, but whatever. So you're ending up with 166. So you put 100 momentums in, you get a total of 166 explosion momentums out. That is, there's motion in the universe. You only had 100 going in, you have 166 going out. I'm saying on its face that doesn't make much sense. Then it gets worse, because what they basically say is now when this swings back down from gravity and this one swings back down with gravity, okay, so now we have 133 momentums swinging this way, and we have 33 coming in this way. So we have a car crash, okay, with 2 cars that have a total momentum of 166, okay? They have a total momentum of 166 coming into the crash. And what's going to pop out of the crash? Just one car going 100 again. So I'm back to this. So somehow I created this extra momentum. The extra momentum comes back in, and somehow it's not extra anymore. So they're telling me that I should believe this, okay, when I haven't seen a physical experiment in the history of everything I've ever seen in physics. So I've never seen a documentary, a show, I've never seen car crashes, I've never seen anything by the Safety Institute. I've never seen anyone, pucks even, where they have little pucks and they take time-lapse photos and they crash 2 pucks into each other at different angles, and the pucks fly off at different angles, and always in every single one of those experiments I've ever seen, momentum is always conserved. That is total momentum. They don't just stop moving. They're hard objects, they always bounce, and they have to bounce with exactly the same momentum that went in. So we have 166 going in, and their argument is, well, this one leaves it with nothing. This is the bottom. So in all I get is 100 out. So I have a car crash with one car and another car, and they come crashing into each other, and somehow they have a total momentum, and they have indestructible bumpers, and somehow out of the crash, I'm not going to get the 166. I'm only going to get 100 coming out. They're saying that's possible. Well, that's not very viewable. So all of that was sort of a waste, wasn't it? Yeah. Eventually I'll figure this out. Or not, frankly. It's a little better. Anyway, so that's where we are. We're stuck. So that's in the 5-minute video. I'm just saying, you're telling me to believe something that seems to me just insanely stupid, because I have never seen it ever detailed by any physicist ever in the history of all the physics I've seen. I've never seen a physicist show me 2 things colliding and then less momentum coming out. Usually they'll say, well, look, it crushed the surface or did something, and that's where the momentum went. So you either show me a crushed fender or crushed something, and then I'll agree, right? And this all started because I saw this stupid physics girl video, where she made this, what I argue is on its face, nonsensical mush explanation. Okay, you have a 5-ton train, all right, it's going 10 velocity, you crash it into another 5 tons, okay, or just drop the 5 tons on, it doesn't matter how you apply it, and you end up with a 10-ton, okay, going 5 velocity. All right, so that part makes perfectly good sense. They've done the experiment many different ways, and yeah, it always comes out this way. And theoretically, okay, they lost half the kinetic energy. Now, the momentum is perfectly conserved. It perfectly makes sense, okay? You added 5 tons, you added 5 to the mass. The velocity has to be spread over that new mass. That takes energy, so now the total velocity is less. Again, this experiment has been done, and 99% of the momentum is conserved. Yeah, you lose a little bit, tiny bit, to a little bit of bouncing or friction or some other nonsense, but you conserve 99% of it. Especially when you're doing the dropping thing, you conserve the momentum because, frankly, the combining energy is going to be provided by gravity. So that's an extra source of energy. And so the combining energy doesn't have anything to do with your motion in this direction. So the experiment works quite well when you drop the mass. And you end up with 99% of the momentum conserved. But by the laws of their math, you lost 1/2 of this is kinetic energy. So this kinetic energy of a 5-ton train going 10 velocity, you lost half of its energy. So you can just imagine the energy that must be. And yet you didn't make any big giant sparks, and you didn't dent anything, and you didn't crush anything, you didn't do anything to account for this half. They just say you did. They say you deformed something, you broke something, you flew, little pieces went to Mars. All kinds of stuff they say happened that you won't see in the experiment. There's absolutely no evidence that anything got really hot. There's no evidence that anything broke. No evidence whatsoever. It's just a fact that their theory, their math says so. They lost half the energy, and you can never stop them from losing half the energy. Because if you conserve the momentum, you have to lose the kinetic energy. As I've said 4,000 times now, any time you change energy from something that has a certain mass, and you put the energy into something that has a different mass, okay, a 5, you're going to have to, okay, destroy the momentum or destroy the kinetic energy. You can't conserve both. And my point is you always conserve the momentum. And kinetic energy is, as Professor Lewin said, nature can deal with that one way or the other. It's mushy. It's vaporous is what it is. It's a fable. It isn't real. The only thing that ever really existed and ever did exist and ever does exist is momentum. That's what Newton believed in. It's what Descartes believed in. It's what Galileo believed in. And it worked. They got right answers understanding conservation of momentum, not conservation of kinetic energy, which clearly in this experiment isn't disappearing, isn't being conserved. They're destroying it. It's clearly a fact that when you do the 5-ton train, add the 5 tons, they're going to destroy the kinetic energy. They're not going to use it to bend something. They're not going to use it in some way. They're going to destroy it. It's going to disappear from existing in the universe. It's not going to make any heat. It's not going to make anything. And that's a violation of the elemental conservation law that basically says you always have to account for energy in the universe. So it's just garbage. And he says, I must believe his proof. His Matchbox car experiment proves it. Proves that somehow it makes sense. That you can make free momentum. No, and that you can destroy it again. No, it doesn't make any sense. Alright, so that's probably enough. Because it really is just redundancy. And so we'll just have to wait until the right experiments are done to pull the truth out of what's going on. But till then, we're stuck with mush. Again, if he can do this free momentum thing, bang something in, you get extra momentum, then just keep doing it. Put another heavier object in front of it. So if your Matchbox cars are creating free momentum in a direction, just put another car in, another car, heavier and heavier, and just see if you can keep making free momentum, more and more of it. Anyway. So, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. But now he has 2 timing gates. The experiment he can do, just to prove the point. If he's going to argue otherwise, I think he's conceding that friction isn't linear because he just said it. The heavier the car, the more friction there is. So he's sort of conceding the point. The more you lose to friction much quicker. So now that he has 2 timing gates, he can do the simple test of just rolling something and seeing that if at 1/3 of the distance, see if it's going 1/2 the velocity. So now he'll be able to test that. He can test something's velocity at where it leaves the ramp, let's say a little simple ramp, You roll it down, do the same experiment each time, same speed here, and see if it's half the velocity, 3/4 of the distance, and then it'll tell you that gravity is controlling the friction and that it's not linear, which is an important fact. Alright, so enough said, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Yuck. People, they do suck.